What happens when the most feared CEO in the city, cold, ruthless, untouchable, meets the one person willing to stand up to him? Nathaniel Stone built an empire on control. Employees whispered his name with dread. Investors trusted him without question, and no one dared confront him until Emma Carter walked into his office quiet, determined, and armed with nothing but patience, wit, and an unshakable belief in human dignity. She spilled coffee on his $1,000 suit. He tried to break her with impossible tasks, but instead of bending, she answered with resilience, humor, and a surprising strength that began to change everything, not only for the people in the company, but for Nathaniel himself. What do you do when the walls you've built your whole life start to crumble? When the one person you thought you could silence becomes the voice you can't ignore, and when power, pride, and betrayal threaten to destroy everything, could compassion, and maybe even love, be the force strong enough to save it all? Stay with us until the very end, because this story will challenge how you see leadership, love, and second chances. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow every chapter of this unforgettable journey. Emma Carter had always believed that beginnings carried a certain kind of weight. A new school, a new town, a new job. Each one demanded a breath held too long, a heart that beat a little faster than usual. On a crisp Monday morning in downtown Denver, that weight pressed heavy on her shoulders as she hurried through the revolving glass doors of Stone Enterprises. The lobby was vast, cold, and polished. Marble floors gleamed like mirrors, tall glass windows swallowed the autumn light, and the silence was broken only by the hurried clicking of heels and the subdued shuffle of papers clutched too tightly. Everyone seemed to move quickly but carefully, as if afraid that making too much noise might disturb some unseen authority. Emma clutched a cardboard tray of 2 coffees, one for herself, one for the man she was about to work for, Nathaniel Stone. The name alone made her palms sweat. She had heard the stories. A millionaire CEO who had built an empire through ruthless decisions, who wore his discipline like a second skin, who rarely smiled. Rumor in the business circles of Denver was that he valued efficiency above all else, and employees were disposable tools if they didn't measure up. Emma adjusted her blazer, muttering under her breath. First impressions matter. Coffee helps. Everyone loves coffee. But as she stepped off the lobby's sleek stone tile, her heel caught the edge of a freshly polished floor. Her balance faltered, the tray tipped, and at that exact moment, a tall figure in a tailored charcoal suit appeared directly in her path. The 2 cups arced through the air in what felt like slow motion. One splattered across the man's pressed white shirt and silk tie. The other hit squarely against his chest, the rich smell of roasted beans filling the air as hot liquid spread across fabric that probably cost more than her rent for the month. The lobby froze. Phones paused mid-scroll. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Even the security guard, who had looked half asleep seconds earlier, lifted his head with the anticipation of a man about to witness a scene worth remembering. Emma's heart sank. She didn't need an introduction. She already knew who he was. Nathaniel Stone. He stopped in his tracks, looking down at the spreading brown stain on his immaculate suit. Then, slowly, he raised his eyes to meet hers. Emma could feel every pair of eyes in the lobby boring into her back. Her breath came in short bursts. Her mind screamed at her to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, to say anything that might soften the wrath of a man whose reputation preceded him. And yet, what slipped out of her mouth was entirely different. "Well," she stammered, forcing a nervous half-smile, "at least now your suit matches the season. Pumpkin spice is all the rage in October." A sharp intake of breath spread across the room like a ripple in water. Someone actually gasped. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. His expression was unreadable, part disbelief, part cold fury. He took one step closer, and Emma realized he was even taller up close, the kind of presence that filled the space without effort, the faint trace of cologne mixed with the bitterness of spilled coffee, creating a strange, heady combination. "Your name," he said finally, his voice low and precise. like the edge of a blade. "Emma," she whispered. Then, clearing her throat, "Emma Carter, your new secretary." Something flickered in his gray eyes. Not amusement, not forgiveness, but something that looked dangerously close to curiosity. "Perfect," he said at last. "Day one. And you've already made an unforgettable impression." Emma swallowed, unsure if she had just signed her professional death sentence. Nathaniel glanced down at his ruined shirt, then back at her. "My office. 10 minutes, and bring a cloth." He turned and walked toward the elevators, his steps sharp, commanding, echoing against the marble floor. As soon as the doors closed behind him, the lobby erupted in whispers. A receptionist near the desk leaned toward a colleague, her eyes wide. 10 minutes in, and she's already part of office legend, she murmured. Emma blew out a shaky breath, staring at the empty coffee tray in her hands. "Welcome to the dream job, Emma," she muttered under her breath. The ride to the 27th floor felt like an eternity. Each ding of the elevator seemed to mock her as she replayed the scene in her head. Spilled coffee, sarcasm, the CEO's icy glare. Could this day get any worse when the doors slid open? She found herself facing a long, quiet hallway. At the far end, Nathaniel Stone's office door stood slightly ajar. His figure was silhouetted against the tall glass windows overlooking the Denver skyline, hands in his pockets, posture as rigid as the steel beams that framed the city. Emma hesitated at the threshold, clutching the cloth she had scavenged from a supply closet. "Come in," he said without turning around. She stepped inside, the sound of her flat soft against the carpet. The silence was thick, pressing against her chest. I'm sorry about the coffee," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "It was an accident. I really wanted to make a good impression." Nathaniel turned slowly, the stain on his shirt still glaringly visible. His gaze was sharp, assessing. "Impressions?" "Miss Carter," he said, his tone clipped, "are made with competence, not with lattes." Emma bit her lip. "So, I guess bringing donuts tomorrow is out of the question." For the briefest moment, his lips twitched as if a smile threatened to appear. But just as quickly, it was gone. He slid a thick folder across the desk toward her. "Work for today," he said. "Let's see if you're better at typing than you are at serving coffee." Emma lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with quiet determination. "I'm excellent at typing. And, for the record, pretty good at coffee when the floor doesn't try to sabotage me. This time," she swore she saw the corner of his mouth lift, if only for a heartbeat. "Go," he said, waving her off. Then, as she reached the door, "And Miss Carter, try not to spill anything else on me." Emma nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Maybe she had started the worst way possible, but something told her this was only the beginning of a story far bigger than a ruined suit. The next morning began with the shrill buzz of the office intercom. Emma had barely settled at her desk, still adjusting her computer monitor and arranging her pens, when Nathaniel Stone's voice filled the small reception area. "Miss Carter, my office, now." The way he said her name carried no warmth, no room for negotiation. Emma exhaled, smoothed her skirt, and walked down the hall, ignoring the furtive glances from employees who looked as though they were witnessing a condemned woman's final walk. Nathaniel didn't glance up when she entered. He sat behind his massive oak desk, reviewing papers with the intensity of a surgeon. His shirt today was slate blue, his tie silver, both pristine as if yesterday's coffee disaster had never happened. "Sit," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. Emma sat, folding her hands in her lap. "I have tasks for you," Nathaniel began, his tone measured, almost bored. "First, the finance department has over 1,000 documents, memos, invoices, reports. They need to be organized alphabetically, then chronologically, then by relevance. Deadline noon." Emma blinked. "Noon. That's 3 hours." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, his pen tapping once against the desk. "Do you find that unreasonable?" "I find it mathematically impossible," she replied evenly. "Then you'd better learn to defy mathematics," he said. returning to his papers. Second, I require a detailed report on the productivity of every employee on the third floor. Today, by 5 o'clock. Emma tilted her head, watching him with quiet curiosity. Every employee, that's 47 people. 49. He corrected without hesitation. And don't forget James at reception and Gloria in accounting. No exclusions, productivity measured by output, efficiency, and punctuality. Emma inhaled slowly, letting his words sink in. He wasn't assigning tasks, he was setting traps. And finally, Nathaniel added, leaning back in his chair, I need one silver paper clip. Just one. Not gold, not chrome, not colored. Silver. Emma stared at him. A silver paper clip. He didn't even look up. Exactly. That will be all. For a moment, Emma considered protesting. Instead, she stood, smoothed her skirt once again, and offered a polite smile. Very well, Mr. Stone, you'll have everything you asked for. As she closed the door behind her, whispers erupted around the office. Sandra from IT leaned toward Tom from marketing. He's trying to crush her. Tom shook his head. She won't last the week. Emma, however, walked back to her desk with measured steps, her mind already racing. If it's war he wants, it's war he'll get. By mid-morning, the atmosphere on the 27th floor had shifted. People who normally avoided looking in the CEO's direction were now stealing glances toward Emma's desk. She worked methodically, stacks of documents piled high, her computer screen alive with spreadsheets and color-coded tabs. At precisely 11:45, Emma walked into Nathaniel's office. He didn't look up, too early for excuses. Miss Carter, he said. No excuses, Emma replied, setting a thick binder on his desk. The finance files organized alphabetically, then chronologically, then by relevance. I also added a few categories of my own color-coded by folder cover and sorted by document thickness. You never know when that might come in handy. Nathaniel looked up, his gray eyes narrowing as he flipped through the binder. The pages were immaculate, tabs neatly aligned, charts precise. You did this in less than 3 hours, he asked, suspicion threading his voice. Emma shrugged lightly. Turns out, I'm good with systems, and coffee helps. For the briefest second, he almost smiled. Almost, and the productivity report, he asked. Emma placed another folder on the desk, this one thicker, filled with graphs and colorful charts. Third floor productivity, with notes on how coffee breaks and background music affect their efficiency. Spoiler performance jumps 23% with jazz. The silence that followed was thick. Nathaniel studied the report, flipping pages faster now, as though trying to find a flaw. The more he searched, the more flawless it appeared. And the paperclip he asked finally, his voice cool. Emma's lips curved into a knowing smile. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. When she opened it, Nathaniel's desk was suddenly flooded with a cascade of silver. Thousands of paper clips tumbled across the polished wood, clinking and scattering like spilled coins. The sound drew the attention of half the floor. Employees gathered discreetly near the glass wall, peering inside. Emma rested her chin on her hand, feigning innocence. I wasn't sure which one you'd prefer, so I brought you a variety. Feel free to pick the perfect silver clip for your extremely important presentation. Nathaniel froze, staring at the mountain of clips now covering his desk. For a man who prided himself on control, it was the most absurdly chaotic sight imaginable. How? He demanded. Did you even get this many I borrowed from other departments? Emma said matter-of-factly. When people heard it was for you, they were happy to contribute. You're very popular. A muffled laugh escaped someone in the hallway. Nathaniel leaned back, exhaling through his nose. He was torn between irritation and reluctant admiration. Emma tapped the edge of the report. By the way, sandwiches are in the kitchen if the team gets hungry. Turkey, ham, and a vegetarian option. The murmurs outside grew louder. Tomorrow, Nathaniel said slowly, his voice tighter than before, I expect my desk to be spotless. And coffee, regular coffee, no surprises. Emma gave a small nod. Of course, Mr. Stone. As she walked out, she caught the glimmer of something rare, his composure cracking. Just slightly. Back at her desk, Sandra whispered. Did you see his face? Tom shook his head in disbelief. I swear, she might actually survive him. Emma allowed herself the faintest smile. She had faced his impossible tests and walked away intact. And though Nathaniel Stone would never admit it out loud, he was beginning to see that Emma Carter was not someone who could be bent so easily. For the first time in years, there was resistance. And maybe, just maybe, that resistance was exactly what Stone Enterprises needed. For the next several days, the 27th floor of Stone Enterprises turned into something that felt less like an office and more like a stage. Every morning, employees arrived not just to complete their assignments, but to witness the latest round in what they had quietly begun calling the Emma vs. Stone saga. Nathaniel Stone, true to his reputation, escalated his challenges. It was as if the man woke each morning, plotting new ways to test his secretary's endurance. On Tuesday, he demanded that Emma prepare a comprehensive timeline of every major contract the company had signed over the past decade, color-coded by profit margin, client location, and overall mood of the negotiation. Emma had raised a brow at that last criterion. Mood of the negotiation. Yes. Nathaniel replied without blinking. If you can't quantify tone, you can't measure efficiency. By lunch, Emma had not only produced the timeline, but also added hand-drawn emoji faces to indicate mood, smiling for smooth negotiations, frowning for disputes, neutral for stalemates. The sight of a multi-million-dollar merger marked with a doodled frown nearly caused Sandra from IT to choke on her water. On Wednesday, Nathaniel raised the bar further. I need an inventory of all pens in the building. Type, color, ink level. By 3 o'clock, Emma stared at him. You want me to count pens? Not just count, he corrected. Evaluate. A company is only as reliable as its tools. By 3 o'clock, Emma delivered a spreadsheet cataloging every ballpoint, rollerball, and fountain pen in the building. She included humorous footnotes, blue rollerball in conference room, B prone to existential crises, runs out of ink at critical moments. The file circulated through the office like wildfire. And by evening, even the most stoic employees were stifling laughter behind their computer screens. Thursday's request was almost theatrical. Nathaniel insisted that Emma write a full report on elevator usage patterns, including peak times and average weight load. Emma didn't flinch. By the end of the day, she had installed a small tally counter in her pocket, interviewed the security guard, and produced a 20-page dossier complete with pie charts. She also included a tongue-in-cheek recommendation that all executives consider taking the stairs for health benefits and improved punctuality. The copy that accidentally ended up in Nathaniel's inbox had the entire floor holding their breath. He read it, expression carved in stone, then simply closed the file and said nothing. As the days unfolded, the war between Nathaniel and Emma developed its own rhythm, sharp, exhausting, yet oddly fascinating. Employees began drifting by Emma's desk under the pretense of asking questions, just to see what impossible challenge she was tackling next. Tom from marketing whispered one morning, "She's like the office's own David against Goliath." Sandra nodded, glancing toward Nathaniel's closed office door. Except Goliath seems weirdly entertained. Indeed, though Nathaniel's face remained unreadable, there were moments small, fleeting, when something softened in his expression as he watched Emma counter his impossible orders with creativity and wit. One Friday afternoon, he summoned her into his office. "Miss Carter," he said, "prepare me a summary of the most effective motivational strategies ever used in American corporations. 25 examples, with case studies by 5 o'clock. Emma tapped her pen against her notepad. Would you prefer them alphabetized, color-coded, or rated by how ridiculous they sound? Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, but the corner of his mouth twitched again, betraying that elusive almost smile. By 5, she handed him a binder with exactly 25 examples, ranging from Apple's famous product launch pep talks to a small Midwestern company that motivated workers by hosting pie baking contests. She even added a section titled Unorthodox Strategies for Stone Enterprises, including karaoke breaks, therapy dogs, and mandatory casual Fridays where even the CEO must wear sneakers. He flipped through the pages silently. Dogs in the office, he said at last. Emma folded her hands primly. Golden retrievers boost morale. Studies show it. The silence that followed was broken only by Nathaniel's exhale, a sound dangerously close to laughter. But beneath the humor, a deeper undercurrent was growing. Emma had begun noticing things others ignored, the tightness in Nathaniel's shoulders when he thought no one was looking, the way his eyes lingered on the city skyline, as if searching for something beyond the glass. He was a man armored in control, yet cracks appeared when challenged. For her part, Emma found herself wrestling with conflicting emotions. She disliked his arrogance, his relentless demands, his belief that people were numbers to be measured. And yet, there was something magnetic about the way he carried himself, the discipline that seemed almost like a cage. She wondered what had built those walls so high. One evening, as she packed up her things, Margaret, the cleaning woman in her 50s, paused by Emma's desk. "I've worked here 15 years, Margaret said softly. No one's ever talked back to him the way you do." Emma smiled faintly. "And that's a good thing," Margaret chuckled. "It's a necessary thing." By the end of the 3rd week, Stone Enterprises no longer felt like the silent, fearful place Emma had first walked into. Laughter occasionally echoed down the halls. Employees swapped stories of Emma's latest victories like baseball stats. Even James, the usually stone-faced security guard, kept a betting pool on how long she'd last, or whether she'd end up outlasting Nathaniel himself. And though Nathaniel would never admit it aloud, he found himself looking forward to her comebacks, her unorthodox reports, her stubborn refusal to be intimidated. For the first time in years, the office felt alive, still. The tension remained, like a bowstring pulled taut. The war between them was far from over. If anything, it was only beginning. The office was nearly silent that Thursday evening. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving behind only the soft hum of air vents and the occasional buzz of a copier warming down. Emma stayed late, hunched over a report she wanted finished before morning. She had found that quiet hours after the rush carried their own kind of clarity. The sound of wheels squeaking along the tile floor broke her concentration. Emma glanced up and saw Margaret Lewis pushing a janitorial cart down the hall. Margaret, with her silver-streaked hair and lined face, was one of those people who seemed both invisible and indispensable. She knew every corner of the building, every creak in the elevator, every stain that refused to lift from the lobby rug. "Evening, Miss Carter," Margaret greeted, her voice warm but weary. "Aye, Margaret," Emma said, standing and stretching her back. "You're still here? It's past 7. Margaret smiled faintly. "I'm always here past 7. Emma tilted her head, curious. "You work that late every day?" Margaret lowered her eyes, focusing on arranging her supplies. "Ever since the team was cut, used to be 5 of us on this floor. Now it's 2, twice the work, same pay." Emma froze, her pen slipping from her hand. "They cut the staff 6 months ago," Margaret replied, voice low as though the walls had ears. "Said it was for cost optimization. That's the phrase they like to use. A polite way of saying we're disposable." Emma's chest tightened. She had heard rumors of Nathaniel's ruthless efficiency, but hearing it from Margaret's mouth was different. "And benefits. Do you still have health insurance?" Margaret gave a hollow laugh. "If you can call it that. Used to have dental, vision, decent coverage. Now it's bare bones. Just enough so they can say we're covered. but not enough for me to get the cataract surgery I need. I'll probably just live with cloudy vision till retirement if I make it that far." Emma sat back in her chair, stunned. That's awful." Margaret shrugged. "That's life when you're on the bottom rung. You keep your head down and hope the paycheck clears. Complaining only paints a target on your back." Emma's fingers curled into fists. A part of her wanted to storm straight into Nathaniel's office and demand answers. But another part whispered that Margaret was right. People here lived in fear, not freedom. Still, Emma pressed gently. "What about the others? Has it been the same for them?" Margaret hesitated, then nodded. The third floor lost their meal stipends. IT folks don't get transport vouchers anymore. And you've seen the kitchen snacks vanish after 3 o'clock. Those little things may not seem like much to people in suits, but for some of us, they matter. Emma thought of Sandra from IT, who always carried a granola bar in her pocket like a lifeline. She thought of Tom from marketing, joking about bus schedules. Suddenly, those jokes felt heavier, she whispered, almost to herself. And meanwhile, Nathaniel struts around in the $1,000 suits. Margaret glanced toward the CEO's closed door and gave Emma a sad smile. "That's how the world works, dear. Some folks live on mahogany floors, others scrub them." When Margaret moved on, Emma sat motionless at her desk, her mind a storm of thoughts. Until now, she had treated Nathaniel's impossible demands as a battle of wit, almost a game. But this was different. This isn't just about me proving myself, she thought. This is about real people paying the price for his decisions. People like Margaret who can't see clearly because her boss values profit over her eyesight. Her chest ached with something she couldn't name, a mixture of anger and sorrow, outrage and helplessness. She wanted to help. But what power did she really have? She was just a secretary, still on probation, fighting her own war to survive. Emma closed her eyes, pressing her palms together. She had come to Denver for a fresh start, not to lead a rebellion. And yet, she could feel it, a seed planting itself deep inside, refusing to be ignored. It whispered of fairness, of dignity, of the quiet strength in people like Margaret who endured without complaint. It whispered that maybe her fight with Nathaniel wasn't just personal, it was moral. Later that night, Emma packed her bag and walked toward the elevator. Through the glass wall of Nathaniel's office, she caught a glimpse of him standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights. His posture was straight, commanding, but there was something lonely in the way he held himself. For a fleeting second, she wondered if he had any idea of the cost of his so-called efficiency. Did he know Margaret couldn't afford surgery? Did he care that his staff skipped meals? That small comforts had been stripped away in the name of optimization. Emma doubted it. To him, numbers mattered more than names. But she had seen the faces behind those numbers now, and she couldn't unsee them. As the elevator doors slid shut, Emma whispered into the silence, "This isn't over." Monday morning dawned gray over Denver, but on the 27th floor of Stone Enterprises, the day began with something no one could have predicted. Emma arrived 2 hours early, carrying paper bags that smelled faintly of cinnamon, butter, and fresh bread. She tied a makeshift apron around her waist, crafted from nothing more than paper towels, and began setting up in the office kitchen. By the time the first employees arrived, the air was filled with the aroma of scrambled eggs, warm croissants, and real coffee, rich and dark, not the thin, bitter brew from the vending machine. "Morning, Sandra," Emma said cheerfully, handing the IT specialist a steaming pastry wrapped in parchment. Sandra blinked. "Suspicious. What's this? What happened to the sad granola bars?" "Today," Emma said, sliding a cup of fresh coffee toward her, "is Operation Smile. Step 1. Nobody starts the week hungry." Within minutes, the kitchen was alive with laughter and chatter. Tom from marketing bit into a ham and cheese croissant and groaned with delight. "If this is a dream, don't wake me up." Each pastry carried a small handwritten note Emma had stayed up late writing. Some were light-hearted, remember coffee first, crisis later. Others were heartfelt, Your work matters. You are seen. You are appreciated. It's a Margaret, the cleaning woman, found hers tucked under a blueberry muffin. Thank you for keeping this place shining. We'd be lost without you. She clutched it with trembling fingers, her eyes filling with tears. The room buzzed with warmth and camaraderie. Employees who usually rushed straight to their desks lingered to talk, to laugh, to savor the rare feeling of being cared for. For a moment, Stone Enterprises felt less like a corporation and more like a community. That was when Nathaniel Stone appeared in the doorway. He stopped, his presence casting a sudden hush over the room. In his charcoal suit and polished shoes, he looked like a shadow against the bright chaos Emma had created. His eyes swept the scene pastries on plates, staff smiling, notes pinned to jackets, and his jaw tightened. "What?" he asked, his voice sharp enough to cut the air. "Is going on here?" The laughter died instantly. Employees froze, their expressions guilty, as though caught breaking some unspoken law. Emma, still holding a tray of muffins, turned to face him with calm defiance. "Good morning, Mr. Stone. Would you like a pastry? They're fresh. Miss Carter, my office. Now." The silence that followed was heavy. Emma set the tray down, offered a reassuring smile to the staff, and walked toward him without flinching. Inside his office, the door closed with a heavy click. Nathaniel stood behind his desk, arms crossed, eyes burning. "Explain yourself," he demanded. Emma met his stare, refusing to shrink. "I made breakfast for the staff. They deserve it. This isn't a charity." Nathaniel snapped. "It's a corporation. Your job is not to play hostess, it's to follow instructions." Emma's voice remained steady, but her heart pounded. "With all due respect, sir, leadership isn't just about instructions. It's about people, and your people are tired, discouraged, invisible. I wanted to remind them they matter." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "You presume to lecture me on leadership." Emma leaned forward slightly, her tone sharpening. "Someone has to, because from where I'm standing, you've forgotten that a company isn't just numbers on a balance sheet. It's human beings, each with lives, families, and needs you've been cutting away piece by piece." His jaw tightened, the muscle twitching. "You don't understand the complexities of running a business?" "I understand enough," Emma countered. "I understand that Margaret can't afford her cataract surgery because her benefits were slashed. I understand that people skip lunch because the meal stipends vanished. I understand that you sit in a $1,000 suit while the people who keep this place running can barely pay rent." For a moment, silence filled the room like a storm held at bay. Nathaniel turned toward the window, his reflection cold against the glass. Those decisions were necessary. Optimization keeps this company competitive. Without it, none of us would have jobs. Emma took a step closer. "There's a difference between being competitive and being cruel. You think efficiency is cutting corners until people break. Real efficiency is when people feel valued enough to give their best willingly. That's leadership." He spun back toward her, eyes flashing. "And you think a plate of pastries will fix that?" Emma didn't back down. "No, but it's a start. And judging by the way your staff laughed this morning, the first genuine laughter I've heard since I arrived, it's more progress than any of your memos ever brought." For a long moment, they stared at each other, the air crackling with unspoken tension. Nathaniel's face softened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of conflict crossing his features. But just as quickly, the mask slid back into place. "You are out of line," he said finally, his tone icy. "This experiment ends now. No more theatrics, no more distractions." Emma felt her throat tighten, but she held her ground. "You can call it theatrics, Mr. Stone. I call it humanity." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. At last. Nathaniel turned away, his voice quieter but no less firm. "Get back to work, Miss Carter." Emma left the office with her heart racing, not sure if she had just signed her own termination. Yet when she returned to her desk, she caught the eyes of her colleagues, Sandra, Tom, Margaret. They didn't speak, but their looks said everything. Thank you. And for Emma, That was enough. The boardroom on the 30th floor of Stone Enterprises was a cathedral of power mahogany table polished to a mirror shine, high-backed leather chairs, and a panoramic view of downtown Denver, glittering beneath the late morning sun. Nathaniel Stone stood at the head of the table, straight-backed and immaculate in a navy suit. He clicked through slides on a large screen, presenting quarterly growth figures with the same precision he used in everything else. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "as you can see, Stone Enterprises has reported a 15% increase across all major sectors. Our strategies are not only working, they're exceeding expectations." The investors murmured approval. Among them sat Thomas Harding, a seasoned banker with silver hair, Margaret Chen, a sharp-eyed strategist, and two others who scribbled notes while sipping imported coffee. Their expressions suggested satisfaction. At the far corner of the room, Emma Carter stood silently, holding a tray of water glasses. She had not been invited to the meeting. She was there only to serve. But her eyes kept drifting to the charts on the screen, and the numbers didn't add up. Her heart thudded. She had seen those same figures the night before while preparing a report. And she remembered something different, a 12% increase, not 15. Someone had rounded up. Emma hesitated, weighing silence against conscience. Nathaniel was in his element, commanding the room, his reputation untouchable. To contradict him here would be professional suicide. But Margaret's cloudy eyes, Sandra's quiet sighs, Tom's worried laughter, they all returned to Emma in that moment. People were paying the price for glossy numbers. She couldn't unsee it. Her hand trembled as she set the tray down. She took one deep breath. Then she spoke. "Excuse me?" The room froze. Nathaniel's head snapped toward her, his expression thunderous. Emma stepped forward, voice steady though her pulse raced. "I believe there's an error in those figures." A ripple moved through the investors. Harding raised his brows. Chen leaned forward, intrigued. Nathaniel's voice cut like a blade. "Miss Carter, this is neither the time nor the place." Emma held her ground. "With respect, Mr. Stone, accuracy doesn't wait for the right time. The numbers you've presented reflect 15% growth, but the corrected total is closer to 12.3. A hush fell over the room. One could almost hear the city traffic 30 floors below. Harding broke the silence. "You're certain?" Emma nodded. "Yes, sir. I checked the finance reports yesterday. A few decimals were rounded up. It inflated the final result." She walked to the screen, pulling a folder from her bag. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice did not falter. "Here are the corrected figures. Along with department-level breakdowns, transparency builds trust. Even if the growth is lower than expected, it's still strong and it's real." She laid colorful charts on the table, hand-drawn, neatly labeled, undeniably clear. Margaret Chen examined them closely. "Impressive. These calculations are meticulous." Nathaniel's face was unreadable, a mask carved from stone, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the remote. Harding chuckled, startling the room. "I've sat in boardrooms for 30 years, and I've never seen a secretary correct her CEO in public with this much composure. Refreshing, to say the least." The other investors exchanged approving glances. Chen tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Mr. Stone, you should be proud. Clearly, your staff is trained to uphold integrity." The irony was sharp, but Nathaniel forced a smile. "Of course, Miss Carter is thorough." Emma inclined her head, returning to the corner. Her knees felt weak, but she stood tall, refusing to shrink. The meeting continued, but Nathaniel's rhythm was broken. His presentation faltered, and though the investors didn't seem to mind, his pride had taken a visible hit. When the final slide clicked off and the investors filed out with satisfied expressions, Harding clapped Emma lightly on the shoulder. "Keep this one close. Stone," he said cheerfully. "She's a diamond in the rough." Only after the last door closed did the air shift. Nathaniel turned slowly toward Emma, his jaw tight, his eyes storm gray. "You humiliated me," he said softly, which was worse than shouting. Emma lifted her chin. I told the truth. You undermined my authority in front of investors. I corrected numbers in front of investors. There's a difference. For a long moment, their gazes locked, unflinching. Nathaniel's fury was palpable, but beneath it, something else flickered, something he couldn't suppress. Admiration. Emma had stood against him in the one arena where he held absolute control, and she had not wavered, at last. Nathaniel exhaled sharply, turning back to the window. Get out. Emma obeyed, her steps measured, her pulse still racing. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this. The walls of Stone Enterprises had shaken today, and for the first time, cracks were visible in Nathaniel Stone's unbreakable armor. The office was quiet again, late on a Wednesday night. Most of the staff had gone home hours earlier, and even the cleaning crew had finished their rounds. Emma stayed behind, determined to catch up on paperwork that Nathaniel had piled onto her desk after the investor meeting. His office door stood ajar. Normally, Emma respected boundaries, but she had been tasked with filing a set of contracts he had left scattered. It wasn't unusual he often treated administrative order as someone else's responsibility. She knocked lightly, no answer. Inside, the room smelled faintly of cologne and leather, the kind of space designed to project power. Emma moved toward the file cabinet against the wall, her eyes scanning labels until she found the drawer marked Archives. She tugged it open, expecting old contracts and tax reports. Instead, she found a thin folder labeled in neat handwriting, Personal, N.S. For a moment, she hesitated, guilt prickling. This wasn't hers to see, but something in the careful lettering, the way the folder was tucked behind others as if hidden, tugged at her curiosity. She slid it out. Inside were photographs yellowed at the edges, brittle with age. The first showed a boy of about 10 at an elaborate birthday party. The cake was enormous, the decorations grand, but the boy stood alone. No friends, no balloons and eager hands. Just a lonely child in a suit too stiff for his age, staring at candles that flickered in silence. Emma's breath caught. The boy was Nathaniel. She turned the next photo, a younger version of him at a boarding school ceremony, standing on a stage with a certificate. Behind him, rows of empty chairs. Another image, a teenage Nathaniel beside two stern-looking adults. His parents, she guessed. Their posture screamed wealth and pride, but neither of them looked at their son. Their gazes were fixed outward, toward the cameras, as if he were a prop in their display. At the bottom of the folder were clippings from society pages. Young heir to the Stone, fortune attends, gala. Alone. Prodigy in business studies, wins early honors. Every article celebrated his accomplishments, but hinted at the isolation behind them. Emma's fingers trembled as she traced one headline. She closed the folder quickly, guilt gnawing at her. She had no right to rifle through his past, and yet her chest ached. Suddenly, Nathaniel wasn't just the aloof, intimidating CEO who wore perfection like armor. He was also the boy in those photographs, the child surrounded by abundance but starved of affection. Emma leaned back against the desk, pressing her palms flat to steady herself. Her mind churned. Do I confront him? Do I let him know I've seen? Or do I keep this to myself? Her conscience wavered. On one hand, she longed to tell him she understood that behind his harshness. She now saw a wound that had never healed. On the other, she feared his wrath. Nathaniel guarded his privacy like a fortress. To expose her discovery might shatter the fragile truce they had built. But what unsettled Emma most was the compassion swelling inside her. Until now, she had seen him only as the enemy, the tyrant boss, the unyielding perfectionist. Now she glimpsed a human being shaped by loneliness and impossible expectations. Is that why he's so hard on everyone? Because no one was ever gentle with him. She pressed her eyes shut, struggling with the contradiction. How could she despise a man for his cruelty, yet ache for the boy who had grown up unloved? A sound startled her, the soft click of the elevator. Emma shoved the folder back into the drawer and closed it. She barely made it back to her desk before Nathaniel entered, his footsteps measured, his face unreadable. He glanced her way, eyebrows faintly raised. Still here, Emma forced a calm smile, though her pulse raced. Just finishing some reports. Nathaniel nodded slightly and disappeared into his office. The door clicked shut behind him. Emma stared at the screen in front of her, but the words blurred. Her mind was still in that folder, with the boy who had once blown out candles alone. She knew she would never look at Nathaniel Stone the same way again. That night, lying in her small apartment bed, Emma turned over and over. She thought of Margaret with her weary eyes, Sandra's granola bars, Tom's forced humor, and Nathaniel's lonely childhood photos. Her heart waged war with itself. Part of her wanted to stay angry, to keep her fight sharp, but another part whispered of pity, of empathy. Maybe his obsession with control, his cold efficiency, wasn't just cruelty. Maybe it was survival, the only way he knew how to exist in a world that had never shown him softness. Emma buried her face in her pillow, whispering into the dark. What am I supposed to do with this? The storm broke on a Tuesday morning. Emma was sorting through a stack of financial reports when a phrase caught her eye. Transfer pending. Offshore holdings. At first, it seemed routine. Stone Enterprises was a global corporation. International transfers weren't unusual. But as she flipped through the pages, the pattern sharpened into something troubling. The amounts were large, the timing suspicious, and the accounts vague, registered under shell companies she had never heard of. Her brows furrowed. She checked the routing numbers twice, then a third time. These weren't ordinary business expenses. They looked like money being siphoned out. Before she could dig deeper, Nathaniel appeared beside her desk. His expression was tight, his voice low. My office? Now. Emma followed, clutching the papers like evidence. Inside, Nathaniel closed the door, his jaw tense. I need to know how much you've seen. Emma blinked. Excuse me. His eyes locked on hers. The transfers. Emma hesitated, then laid the documents on his desk. Enough to know something's wrong. These accounts aren't standard, and if the IRS sees this, they will. Nathaniel interrupted grimly, running a hand through his hair. And when they do, this company could be facing an investigation that buries us. Emma studied him. He wasn't angry, not in the usual way. He looked shaken. Who authorized them? She asked. Nathaniel exhaled sharply. Richard Hale, CFO, my oldest friend. The name struck Emma like a jolt. She had met Richard once in passing, a tall, charismatic man with an easy laugh and a handshake that lingered. She remembered thinking he seemed the opposite of Nathaniel, approachable, relaxed, almost too charming. You trust him, Emma said softly. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. I did. That afternoon, Nathaniel called Richard into his office. Emma was asked to stay, to take notes. Richard walked in with his usual grin. Nate, you look like you haven't slept in days. What's eating you? Nathaniel didn't return the smile. He slid the documents across the desk. These? Care to explain? Richard skimmed them, his grin never faltering. Standard reallocations. You know how it is, tax optimization, liquidity management. Don't insult me, Nathaniel snapped. These are offshore accounts, hidden under shell corporations. Funds are missing. Richard leaned back in his chair, unbothered. Every corporation moves money. It's called survival. You of all people should appreciate that. Emma watched the two men, Nathaniel rigid with fury, Richard lounging like a cat. Something about the casualness of Richard's tone made her skin crawl. You're stealing, Nathaniel said flatly. Richard chuckled. I'm ensuring both of us stay wealthy. You play the respectable CEO, I handle the shadows. It's a good balance. Nathaniel's fist clenched on the desk. We're not criminals. Richard's smile hardened. You've always been naive, Nate. Business isn't about right and wrong. It's about winning. And I'm not about to lose. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emma felt her pulse race. She could see it in Nathaniel's eyes. Betrayal, anger, disbelief. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, fractured beyond repair. "Get out," Nathaniel said finally, his voice low with controlled fury. "And don't set foot in this office until I say otherwise." Richard rose slowly, straightened his tie, and smirked. "You'll thank me one day." Then he left. The door shut, and Nathaniel sank into his chair, shoulders slumping. Emma had never seen him look smaller. "I grew up with him," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "We shared dorm rooms, family holidays, secrets. He was the only one I trusted." Emma's chest tightened. She wanted to reach out, but hesitated. "What do we do?" she asked gently. Nathaniel lifted his head, gray eyes meeting hers. For once, the mask was gone. He looked vulnerable, uncertain. "We fight," he said, "but I can't do it alone." Emma swallowed, the weight of his words pressing down on her. "Then you won't." Something shifted in that moment. Not a grand declaration, not a sudden intimacy, but a fragile bridge built from necessity. For the first time, Nathaniel let her in. Not as an employee to command, but as a partner in crisis. The following days were consumed by late nights and whispered strategy sessions. Emma combed through accounts, tracing money trails with meticulous care. Nathaniel handled calls with lawyers, keeping suspicion from spreading to the board. They worked side by side in the dim glow of computer screens, the silence broken only by the rustle of papers and the occasional sigh. One night, as Emma handed him a fresh report, their fingers brushed. She glanced up, startled, and caught him watching her, not with the cold scrutiny she had come to expect, but with something softer. He looked away quickly. "Good work," he muttered. Emma said nothing, but inside, something stirred. The office lights glowed long after midnight, casting soft pools of yellow across stacks of financial records. The city of Denver stretched beyond the glass walls, silent, glittering, unaware of the quiet war being waged inside Stone Enterprises. Emma rubbed her temples, her eyes aching from hours of reading spreadsheets. Beside her, Nathaniel sat hunched forward, his tie loosened, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows. It was the most human she had ever seen him, stripped of his perfect armor, just a man fighting against betrayal and numbers that refused to balance. "You missed a decimal here," Emma murmured, sliding one page toward him. Nathaniel glanced, then sighed. Richard was careful. Too careful. He covered his tracks with layers of transfers. "It'll take weeks to unravel." Emma offered a faint smile. "Good thing I like puzzles." For a moment, the corner of his mouth lifted, but it faded quickly. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "I can't believe I didn't see it. I should have caught this years ago." "You trusted him," Emma said gently. His laugh was humorless. "That's the problem, isn't it? Trust is a liability in this world." Emma studied him, noticing the shadows under his eyes, the weariness in his posture. He looked less like the ruthless CEO everyone feared, and more like a man carrying the weight of a lifetime alone. "Or maybe," she said softly, "trust is exactly what makes us human. Without it, all we have left is suspicion and loneliness." Nathaniel's eyes flicked to hers, sharp, searching. "And what do you trust?" "Miss Carter." Emma hesitated, then answered truthfully. "Instinct, compassion, the belief that even when people fail, they can change." The silence stretched between them. He looked at her as if she were speaking a foreign language, yet something in his gaze softened, as though he wanted to believe her but didn't know how. Hours passed. Papers spread across the desk, highlighted and marked with notes in Emma's neat handwriting. Nathaniel leaned closer, reading over her shoulder. She could feel the warmth of his presence, his breath brushing against her hair. At one point, their hands brushed again as they reached for the same file. Emma froze, her pulse quickening. Nathaniel paused too, his eyes lingering on her hand before pulling back slowly. Neither spoke of it, but the air between them shifted. "Your attention to detail," Nathaniel said quietly, "is remarkable. You see things most people overlook. Emma smiled faintly. Sometimes the little things matter most. Even decimals. He gave a low chuckle, surprising both of them. The sound was rare, unpracticed, but it made her chest tighten. Around 2A. Emma leaned back with a groan. If I stare at one more column of numbers, I'll start dreaming in percentages. Nathaniel set his pen down, his face drawn but calmer than before. You should go home. Get some rest. She shook her head. Not until we figure this out. He studied her, a flicker of something like admiration crossing his features. Most people would have quit by now. Emma met his gaze steadily. Most people don't have as much to lose. The room fell silent again. Nathaniel's eyes held hers, steady, unguarded. For the first time, she saw the man beneath the armor, the boy from those photographs, still searching for someone to stand beside him. She swallowed, forcing herself to look back at the spreadsheets. We'll get through this. Together. The word hung in the air, together. Nathaniel didn't reply, but his expression shifted. The hardness in his face eased, replaced by something quieter. By dawn, the sky outside had begun to pale. Emma stacked the final set of reports, her body aching with exhaustion. Nathaniel stood at the window, watching the sunrise wash the city in gold. It's strange, he said quietly. All these years, I've built walls around myself. And now, you're inside them. Emma's heart skipped. She opened her mouth, but no words came. He turned, his expression unreadable again. Thank you, Miss Carter, for staying. Emma gave a small nod. She didn't trust her voice. As she gathered her things, their eyes met once more. There was no declaration, no touch, but something unspoken passed between them, fragile, uncertain, yet undeniable. The beginning of trust. The idea came to Emma during one of those rare lulls in the storm of paperwork. She sat in Nathaniel's office, eyes fixed on a half-empty cup of coffee, when a thought sparked like lightning. If Richard Hale had been siphoning money for years, he wouldn't stop now. He would need to keep feeding his hidden accounts. That meant one thing: temptation could be their greatest weapon. She looked up from her notes. What if we bait him? Nathaniel slouched against the back of his chair, narrowed his eyes. Bait him, with what hope that he trips over his own lies? Emma leaned forward, her voice steady. No, with a contract, a fake one, something too good to resist. If he's as greedy and reckless as we think, he'll take the risk. He'll try to leak it, and that's when we'll catch him. The room went still. The ticking of the old clock on Nathaniel's wall filled the silence. He drummed his fingers against the mahogany desk, his jaw tight. You're asking me to gamble my company on your instinct. Emma didn't flinch. I'm asking you to trust me. It's the only way to prove what he's done. Numbers don't lie, but people do. We have to let him expose himself. Nathaniel's eyes lingered on her face. She was calm, resolute, unwavering. For a man who had spent his life surrounded by sycophants and opportunists, her conviction was disarming. Still, fear gnawed at him. Richard had been his friend, once the closest thing he'd ever had to a brother. To admit betrayal meant admitting he had been blind. Finally. He exhaled, long and weary. All right, we do it your way. But if this fails, Emma interrupted gently, it won't. The following night, the trap was set. Inside the Stone Enterprises conference room, the air was sharp with tension. Agents from the FBI occupied discreet corners, dressed in plain clothes, blending into the shadows. A single folder lay on the polished table, carefully placed as though forgotten, a fabricated investment contract, brimming with numbers designed to dazzle. It promised astronomical returns if leaked to the right competitor, an irresistible lure for a man like Richard Hale. Nathaniel stood near the window, arms crossed, shoulders stiff. Emma sat at the table, pretending to sort through documents while her heart pounded. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of paper seemed deafening. At last, The door opened. Richard entered, his familiar easy smile stretched across his face. "Burning the midnight oil again?" he asked, glancing between Nathaniel and Emma. Nathaniel forced a polite nod. "Always." Richard's eyes landed on the folder. He hesitated only a fraction of a second before masking it with a casual stride toward the table. Emma's breath caught. He opened the folder, flipping through the pages with feigned disinterest, but Emma saw the gleam in his eyes, the hunger. "This looks interesting," Richard said smoothly. "Big numbers. Risky play." Nathaniel's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the window frame. He couldn't bear to watch, but he couldn't look away. Richard tucked the folder under his arm. "Mind if I review this later, just to make sure all the figures add up?" Emma held her breath. This was it. The bait had been taken. Hours later, the FBI tracked the movement. Richard had left the building with the contract, and within 30 minutes, data showed him transmitting sensitive information through a private server. The evidence was undeniable. Agents swarmed. Emma and Nathaniel watched from behind the glass walls as Richard was led back into the conference room, his hands cuffed, his smile gone. Nathaniel's chest felt hollow. "It's true," he whispered, almost to himself. All this time, it was him. Emma glanced at him, her heart aching at the devastation etched across his face. Richard had been more than a CFO. He had been a thread tying Nathaniel to a childhood where friendship was rare. Now that thread had been cut, leaving nothing but betrayal. Richard's eyes met Nathaniel's as agents read him his rights. For a fleeting second, something like regret flickered there, but it vanished, replaced by cold defiance. "You always thought you were better than me," Richard spat. "But you were just blind." Nathaniel's voice was low, steady, but trembling underneath. "I trusted you." Richard smirked as the agents dragged him away. "That was your first mistake." When the room emptied, silence fell heavy. Nathaniel stood motionless, staring at the empty chair where Richard had sat. Emma approached cautiously, unsure if he wanted company. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Nathaniel turned to her, his eyes haunted. "He was my only friend. Emma, the only one who knew me before all this." He gestured vaguely to the skyscrapers, the empire he had built. "And now I find out he's been stealing from me, from my people, for years." Emma reached out, resting a hand lightly on his arm. "Betrayal doesn't erase who you are. It just shows who he became." For a moment, he looked at her as though clinging to her words, needing them to be true. His defenses faltered, and she saw the lonely boy from the photographs again, the boy who had longed for trust and never truly found it. "Then why?" Nathaniel murmured, his voice breaking. "Does it feel like I've lost everything?" Emma didn't answer right away. Instead, she stayed by his side, her quiet presence speaking more than any reassurance could. Because sometimes, the only way to face the weight of betrayal was to not face it alone. The office still smelled faintly of stale coffee and printer ink when Nathaniel's phone rang. It was nearly midnight. Emma was gathering files into neat stacks, her movement slow with exhaustion. She barely noticed the sharp vibration against his desk until Nathaniel froze, staring at the caller ID. For a man usually so controlled, the change in him was startling. His hand trembled as he picked up the phone. "Hello?" His voice cracked. A pause. Then his eyes widened, color draining from his face. "When which hospital?" Emma straightened, heart tightening at the raw panic in his tone. Nathaniel's grip on the phone whitened. "I'll be there within the hour." He hung up, but his hand stayed on the receiver as though it were the only thing holding him upright. Emma's voice was gentle. He swallowed hard. "It's my father. Heart attack. He's in the ICU." The words fell heavy, as though admitting them made the crisis real. For a moment, Nathaniel wasn't the formidable CEO who commanded boardrooms. He was just a son staring at the possibility of losing the only parent he had left. He began pacing the length of the office, his composure unraveling with every step. The company is on fire. The FBI is circling. Richard's betrayal still bleeding into every corner of the business, and now this. If I leave, everything could collapse. If I stay, I might never. His voice broke. He couldn't finish. Emma stepped into his path, forcing him to stop. "Listen to me," she said firmly, though her own throat was tight. "Your company can wait. Your father can't." Nathaniel shook his head, torn. "You don't understand. He's never been. He's not the kind of man who wants company at his bedside. He'll tell me to stay here, to keep the machine running." Emma's eyes softened. "Maybe. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't go. Sometimes showing up matters more than being welcomed." He looked at her, eyes stormy, full of years of unspoken history. "You don't know him." "Maybe not," Emma admitted. "But I know you. And if you don't go, you'll regret it every single day of your life. The company can survive one night without you. Can you survive knowing you weren't there?" Silence hung thick between them. The hum of the city beyond the glass. The muted shuffle of papers, everything felt suspended in time. Emma reached out, her hand finding his. It was a small gesture, but it cut through the storm raging inside him. His fingers tightened around hers, desperate, grounding. "I can't leave you here to clean up my mess," he whispered, voice raw. Her answer was quiet, steady. "Yes, you can. Because I'll manage. Because you need to do this. And because for once in your life, Nathaniel, you need to stop being a CEO and start being a son." His chest heaved, fighting against the truth she had laid bare. Then, slowly, he nodded. An hour later. Emma stood at the front of Stone Enterprises, watching him disappear into the night with uncharacteristic haste. For the first time, she had seen him shed the armor of power and allow himself to be vulnerable. For the first time, he had let someone else carry a piece of his burden. She pressed her hand against her chest, still feeling the weight of his grip on hers. Something had shifted, something she couldn't yet name. Nathaniel had always been a figure of intimidation. Tonight, he had been a man, frightened and fragile, and she had been the one he leaned on. It wasn't just alliance anymore. It was closeness, the fragile beginning of something far deeper. The hospital's fluorescent lights hummed softly above the waiting room. Nathaniel sat in a rigid chair, his shoulders bent, his face shadowed by exhaustion. His father was still in the ICU. Machines kept the old man's heart steady, but the uncertainty was unbearable. Emma had arrived after finishing her tasks at the office. She found him there alone, hands clasped, staring at the floor as if sheer willpower could change the outcome. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she sat beside him, their silence a fragile bridge. Finally, Nathaniel broke it. "I hate this," he said, his voice low, rough. "I hate not being in control. Numbers, contracts, buildings, I can bend those to my will. But life doesn't care how many millions I make or how many people fear me." Emma listened quietly, her gaze steady. He continued, the words tumbling like water breaking through a dam. "I've spent my whole life building walls, power, money, reputation. They were armor, but inside," he shook his head, jaw tight. "Inside it's just noise, loneliness, empty rooms. People look at me and see the CEO, the millionaire, the man who doesn't need anyone. But the truth," his eyes lifted to hers, raw and unguarded, "no one really knows me. No one really wants to." Emma's chest tightened. She had seen glimpses of this side of him before, but never so bare, never so vulnerable. She took a slow breath. "Nathaniel, leadership isn't about armor. It's not about bending people with fear or keeping everyone at a distance. True strength, the kind people remember, isn't control. It's connection." He gave a hollow laugh. "Connection. That's easy for you to say. People like you, they open up to you." She shook her head. "Not because I'm special, because I choose to see them, because I listen. People don't need perfection. They don't need power. They need someone who cares enough to stand beside them, even when things fall apart." Her words hung in the sterile air. Nathaniel turned them over in his mind, his usual sharp rebuttals silenced. For once, he let her perspective seep in. "I don't know if I can be that man," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I don't know how." Emma reached out, placing her hand over his. It was warm, steady, grounding. "You don't have to know everything. You just have to start. One step at a time. And you don't have to do it alone." Nathaniel's eyes locked on hers. For a moment, the hum of machines, the bustle of nurses, the weight of fear all faded. There was only the two of them, hands clasped, truths laid bare. Something shifted then. The mask he wore, the unshakable, untouchable CEO, cracked. Beneath it was a man longing not for control, but for connection. Emma's heart pounded as she realized her feelings were no longer just professional concern. Somewhere in the nights of shared work, in the battles and the quiet moments, affection had taken root. Nathaniel's grip on her hand tightened. "You're the only one who's ever talked to me like this," he whispered. "The only one who's ever dared to." She smiled softly. "Maybe that's what you've needed all along." Their eyes lingered on each other, a silence heavy with meaning. Neither said the word, but both felt the pull. Affection, fragile but undeniable, had crossed the threshold into something more. The morning after Nathaniel's father stabilized, the air at Stone Enterprises was strangely lighter. Employees smiled more easily, whispered greetings in the hallways. Emma noticed it as she carried her coffee toward her desk. Her small efforts to lift spirits were starting to ripple outward. But before she could sit down, Jennifer, the receptionist, appeared with a polished-looking man at her side. Tall, confident, dressed in a tailored navy suit, he radiated charm. "Emma," Jennifer said, flustered, "this is Andrew Whitmore. He asked for you personally." Emma blinked. For me, Andrew extended his hand, his smile warm but sharp with intent. "Miss Carter, a pleasure. I've heard quite a bit about you." "Do you have a few minutes against her better judgment?" Curiosity tugged at her. "All right, my office inside." Andrew wasted no time. He leaned forward, clasping his hands. "I won't mince words. I represent Whitmore Holdings. We've been following your work here. The way you challenge false data in front of investors, the morale shift under your influence, it's impressive. Frankly, it's the kind of leadership most companies dream of." Emma's cheeks warmed. Praise was rare in this building, rarer still directed at her. "That was just doing my job." Andrew shook his head. "No, that was vision, which is why I'm here to make you an offer." He slid a sleek folder across the desk. Emma opened it, and her breath caught. "Executive Vice President, salary $320,000 annually. Full benefits, creative control in developing corporate culture initiatives." She stared at the words, her pulse quickening. It was everything she had ever dreamed of: recognition, responsibility, independence. Andrew's voice was smooth, persuasive. "You've outgrown your role here, at Whitmore Holdings. You wouldn't be a secretary holding a company together behind the scenes. You'd be leading it forward. This is a chance to shape something bigger than yourself." Emma closed the folder slowly, her thoughts a storm. That evening, she sat in her small apartment, staring at the offer letter on her coffee table. Her mind kept swinging between two poles. On one side, the promise of respect, influence, financial security, a future where she wasn't dismissed, underestimated, or forced to fight tooth and nail just to be heard. On the other side, Stone Enterprises, a company riddled with scars but filled with people she cared for. Margaret with her quiet resilience, Brian with his shy brilliance, the countless employees who looked at her with hope whenever she spoke up, and Nathaniel. Her stomach tightened at the thought of him. The man infuriated her, challenged her, but also trusted her in ways no one else ever had. She had seen his cracks, his loneliness, his humanity. Could she walk away from that? The next day, Nathaniel noticed the shift. Emma was quieter, distracted, her gaze often distant. He watched her through the glass of his office, unease gnawing at him. Finally, he stepped out, Carter, my office. Now, inside, the tension was immediate. Nathaniel folded his arms, his voice sharp. Who is Andrew Whitmore, and why was he here yesterday? Emma stiffened. So you already know. I make it my business to know, Nathaniel snapped. What did he want? Her jaw tightened. He offered me a position. Executive Vice President, full control over culture development. Nathaniel's composure faltered for a split second. And are you considering it? Emma lifted her chin. Of course I am. It's everything I've worked toward. Recognition, authority, the chance to make real changes. The silence stretched. Nathaniel's eyes burned with something he rarely let slip: fear. So, you'll leave? Emma's throat tightened. I don't know yet. He slammed his hand against the desk, startling her. Damn it! Emma? After everything we've fought side by side, uncovered betrayal, kept this company alive, and now, when we're finally starting to rebuild, you just walk away. Her own frustration flared. Don't you dare guilt me. You don't own me. Nathaniel, I've given everything here: my time, my ideas, my heart, and half the time. You barely acknowledge it. His jaw clenched. You think I don't see, you think I don't. He stopped, the words choking off, his fists curled at his sides. What? Nathaniel, Emma demanded. Her voice cracked, a mix of anger and longing. What is it you can't say for a moment? His expression wavered, raw, vulnerable, but then he looked away, retreating into silence. Emma swallowed hard, tears threatening. That's what I thought. She turned for the door. I'll make my decision soon. And with that, she walked out, leaving Nathaniel standing alone in the cavernous office, battling a fear greater than any hostile takeover: the fear of losing her. The letter sat in Emma's purse like a stone. All morning, she walked through the familiar halls of Stone Enterprises with the weight of Whitmore's offer pressing down on her. Every nod from an employee, every cautious smile, every whispered good morning felt sharpened by the knowledge that she might not be here tomorrow. She paused by the break room and found Margaret, the cleaning woman, pouring coffee into a chipped mug she carried from home. Margaret's hands shook slightly, but she smiled anyway when she saw Emma. Morning, dear, Margaret said. That little breakfast you set up last week, folks are still talking about it. You've brought something back to this place. Feels lighter these days. Emma's chest tightened. She forced a smile. I'm glad. As she walked away, her thoughts churned. How could I leave these people? They deserve someone to fight for them, someone to make sure they're not invisible. Yet the other voice inside her whispered seductively, you've earned the right to move forward, to finally be more than a secretary fighting uphill battles. By lunchtime, the conflict had left her raw, her decision hanging in the balance. That evening, she returned to her apartment, dropped her bag, and pulled out the offer letter. She spread it across the kitchen table, smoothing the crisp paper as if it held her future. The numbers gleamed, the title gleamed, everything about it screamed progress. But when she closed her eyes, what she saw weren't corner offices or paychecks. She saw Margaret's weary smile, Brian's awkward gratitude when she fixed the stapler, Sandra's laughter at one of her notes, and Nathaniel, his face in the hospital waiting room, stripped of power, full of fear and truth. Her hand hovered over the letter, ready to sign, but then she whispered aloud, her voice trembling, "This isn't where I belong." Tears stung her eyes, a mix of relief and terror. She wasn't chasing the easier road. She was choosing the harder one, the messier one, because it mattered, because they mattered. The next morning, she walked into Stone Enterprises with renewed resolve. She would tell Nathaniel her choice, tell him she was staying. But when she reached his office, she froze. Nathaniel was already there, pacing like a man rehearsing a battle speech. But when he looked up and saw her, something shifted. He wasn't the impenetrable CEO anymore. His tie was crooked, his eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. "Emma," he said, voice hoarse. She stepped in, closing the door softly behind her. "Nathaniel?" "I need to tell you something." "No," he interrupted. shaking his head. I have to go first. If I don't, I never will. Emma blinked, surprised. All right. He took a shaky breath, forcing himself to meet her eyes. I've been a fool. I've hidden behind numbers and power, thinking that if I controlled everything, I couldn't lose anything. But then you walked in with coffee spilled on my suit, with your defiance, your ridiculous notes, your impossible courage, and suddenly I was losing control everywhere. Emma's throat tightened. Nathaniel. He pressed on, his voice breaking. I thought if I pushed you, you'd leave, like everyone else eventually does. But you didn't. You stayed, you fought me, you challenged me, and somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, I realized I need you, not just as my secretary, not just as someone who saves this company. I need you. Emma's heart pounded. She searched his face, expecting arrogance or calculation, but all she saw was sincerity trembling beneath his usual steel. He stepped closer, almost tentative. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be open. But if you leave, Emma, I don't just lose an employee. I lose the only person who's ever really seen me. The silence was heavy, charged. Emma felt the weight of his words settle deep inside her. Slowly, she shook her head. I was offered a chance to leave, a salary bigger than anything I could dream of, a title that would make people finally respect me. I almost said yes. Nathaniel's face faltered, pain flickering. But, she continued, her voice firming, I realized respect doesn't come from titles, and my place isn't in some shiny new office. It's here, with these people, with you. Relief and disbelief crossed his features all at once. He let out a shaky laugh, almost boyish. So, you're staying? Emma smiled faintly. I'm staying, but not because you need me, Nathaniel, because I choose to. Something in him broke then, not in weakness, but in release. His usual restraint melted as he reached for her hand, holding it as though it were the only solid thing in his world. I don't deserve this, he whispered. Emma squeezed his hand. Maybe not, but you can grow into it. It wasn't a grand, sweeping declaration. It was awkward, unfinished, raw, but it was real. And for both of them, it was enough. 6 months later, Stone Enterprises was nearly unrecognizable. The sterile, tension-filled silence that once defined the 27th floor had been replaced by the hum of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter, and the smell of fresh coffee that wasn't from a vending machine. The break room had been renovated, stocked with healthy meals and snacks that employees no longer had to ration. New benefits had rolled out, dental and vision restored, transportation stipends reinstated, even a wellness program that included therapy sessions and gym memberships. Where fear had once kept people quiet, now voices filled the air, voices offering ideas, collaborating, challenging one another. And Nathaniel Stone, the man once known as the untouchable CEO, was walking among them. On a Tuesday morning, he stopped by the marketing department, leaning against a cubicle while Tom pitched a new campaign. That's clever, Nathaniel said with a half smile. But tell me, would you buy it? Tom blinked, caught off guard, then grinned. Honestly, yeah, it'd make me laugh enough to click. Nathaniel chuckled and patted the cubicle wall before moving on. Employees exchanged wide-eyed glances. 6 months ago, the very idea of Nathaniel Stone joking in the cubicles would have sounded like fiction. Now, it was becoming routine. The shift hadn't come overnight. It had taken relentless work, late-night meetings, and policies rewritten from the ground up. Emma had been at the center of it all, officially. She was now Director of Project Initiatives, a title Nathaniel had personally created for her after she refused to accept a ceremonial role. Unofficially, she was the heart of the company's transformation. It was Emma who drafted the wellness proposals, Emma who organized focus groups to listen to employees, Emma who stood beside Nathaniel in town hall meetings, reminding him when to pause and actually hear the people he once ignored. Her influence was everywhere in the flexible hours that let parents attend their children's school plays, in the art hanging in the lobby chosen by staff vote, in the fact that Margaret, the cleaning woman, now had a full team again, and medical benefits that covered her long-delayed cataract surgery. One Friday afternoon, Emma walked through the open concept workspace with a clipboard. She paused by Sandra's desk. "How's the new system treating IT?" Emma asked. Sandra beamed. "We actually want to come to work now. That's a first. And Margaret, she can see clearly again. She says she feels 20 years younger." Emma smiled, warmth filling her chest. This was why she had stayed. Not for a title or a paycheck, but for the lives that change in small, tangible ways. That evening, Nathaniel joined her in the rooftop garden, a space Emma had insisted on creating for employees. The sun was dipping below the Denver skyline, painting the city in gold. Employees were already trickling up, some watering plants, others just enjoying the air. Nathaniel leaned against the railing, his suit jacket slung casually over one shoulder. "Do you ever look around and wonder if this is really the same company?" Emma smirked. "Every day." He nodded slowly. "I used to think leadership was about control, but you taught me it's about trust, about creating an environment where people don't just work, they thrive." Emma glanced at him, her voice softer. "And you made the choice to change. That wasn't me. That was you." For a moment, his eyes lingered on hers, the city lights reflecting in their depths. Then he looked away, clearing his throat. "6 months ago, I didn't think this company or I could be saved. But here we are, and here you are," Emma added gently. The transformation wasn't just corporate. Nathaniel himself had shifted. He still carried the same sharp mind, the same relentless drive, but it was tempered now with humanity. He attended birthday lunches, sent personal notes of encouragement, even shared stories of his failures during leadership meetings. For the employees, it was as if the man who had once loomed like a storm cloud had become a steady sun, still powerful, but life-giving instead of fearsome. And for Emma, watching him grow into this role was its own quiet reward. The man she had once challenged with silver paper clips and sarcastic notes was now someone who inspired loyalty, not dread, someone who, more and more, she found herself drawn to not just as a colleague, but as a man learning how to be whole. As twilight deepened, Nathaniel turned to her again. "Emma, I can never repay you for what you've done here." She smiled faintly. "Don't repay me. Just keep building on it. Make sure it lasts long after both of us are gone." He studied her, then gave a rare, unguarded smile. Together. Then Emma's heart stirred, steady and certain. Together. The restaurant Nathaniel chose wasn't the kind of place anyone would have expected from a man who once measured his worth in power and prestige. It was a small family-owned diner on the outskirts of Denver, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths, the scent of grilled steak lingering in the air, and soft jazz playing from an old radio in the corner. Emma raised an eyebrow as she slid into the booth across from him. "This is not what I pictured." Nathaniel smirked, loosening his tie. "What did you picture? Crystal chandeliers, imported caviar?" She grinned. "Something like that." He shook his head, looking almost boyish under the warm lights. "No, tonight needs to be simple, real, no distractions." They ordered dinner burgers, fries, and a slice of cherry pie to share. As they ate, their conversation flowed easily, drifting from company projects to favorite books, to childhood memories Emma coaxed out of him with patience and humor. For once, there were no crises to solve, no numbers to argue over, no walls between them, just two people discovering the comfort of being fully seen. When the plates were cleared away, Nathaniel grew quiet. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small velvet box, and placed it on the table between them. Emma's breath caught. "Emma Carter," he began, his voice unsteady. "You walked into my office by accident, spilled coffee on me, and turned my world upside down. At first, I thought you were a nuisance. Then I realized you were a mirror showing me everything I'd become, and everything I could be. You challenged me, fought me, refused to let me hide. And somewhere in all of that, You save me." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Nathaniel. He pushed the box toward her, his hand trembling. "I don't have a speech polished or a diamond the size of a skyscraper. What I have is this me, stripped of everything but the truth. And the truth is, I love you. I need you. Will you marry me?" The diner's soft jazz seemed to fade into silence. Emma stared at him, her heart swelling with emotion so fierce it almost hurt. She smiled through her tears, reaching for his hand. "Yes. 1,000 times. Yes." Nathaniel exhaled, the tension in his shoulders melting into a smile that was equal parts relief and joy. He slipped the simple ring onto her finger, and when their hands met across the table, it felt like the final piece of a long, unfinished puzzle sliding into place. Later, as they left the diner hand in hand, the cool night air wrapped around them, Nathaniel stopped under a street lamp, turning to face her. "You've taught me something I should have learned long ago," he said softly. "That real strength doesn't come from fear or control. It comes from kindness, from compassion, from knowing that leadership isn't about being above people, it's about walking beside them." Emma squeezed his hand. "And love." He smiled, eyes shining. Love makes all of it possible. In the months that followed, Stone Enterprises continued to flourish. Employees thrived under policies shaped not by profit alone, but by humanity. The rooftop garden bloomed. Margaret laughed again, her eyes clear after long-awaited surgery. Sandra started a mentorship program for young coders. Tom finally took that vacation to the coast. And through it all, Emma and Nathaniel led side by side, not as boss and secretary, not as savior and saved, but as partners in every sense of the word. The story of Nathaniel Stone became more than a corporate turnaround. It became a testament whispered among the staff, shared at conferences, written about in business journals, the CEO who learned that the greatest asset isn't capital, it's compassion. And for Emma, it became proof that change is possible, even in the most unlikely of places. That a single act of courage, standing up, speaking truth, choosing empathy, can spark transformation that ripples outward like light breaking through darkness. As the city lights glowed around them that night, Emma leaned into Nathaniel's side, her head resting on his shoulder. The future stretched before them, uncertain but full of promise. And in that quiet moment, both knew that the story they had written together was only just beginning. At its heart, this story isn't just about a powerful CEO or a determined secretary. It's about the kind of strength that truly lasts. Nathaniel believed leadership was about control, about fear, about building walls so high no one could ever reach him. Yet it was Emma's quiet courage, her kindness, and her refusal to look away from the struggles of others that transformed not only a company, but a man's entire way of living. The lesson is simple, but profound. Real leadership is not measured in profit margins or titles, but in the lives we touch. We live in a world that often prizes wealth, efficiency, and reputation above compassion. But it is compassion that leaves the deepest mark. It is listening, seeing others, and daring to care when it's inconvenient that can change a community or even heal a lonely heart. For those of us who have lived through many seasons, this story is a reminder it's never too late to change, to soften, to lead with humanity. And perhaps the greatest legacy we leave is not in what we built, but in how we loved, encouraged, and lifted those around us. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and following this story to the very end. We truly hope it touched your heart and gave you something meaningful to reflect on. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a like, share it with friends who might also need a little inspiration, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next story. Your support means the world. It helps us keep bringing these heartfelt stories to life. Until next time, take care and keep shining.